the Scottish Claymore.
Claymore! Yeah. Enjoy it.
This massive two-handed sword was wielded by Scottish Highlanders as early as 1490. Made famous in modern pop culture by the film Braveheart, its impressive size and length made it a fearsome weapon. The Claymore is easily recognizable by its quatrefoil crossguard and angled arms. Due to its large size, the heavy sword was usually swung with two hands. It was so deadly, it was nicknamed the Slaughter Sword by the English who faced it on the battlefield. Because of its prowess, the Claymore was a mainstay of the Scottish army for nearly 2 centuries. Let's see it. The hook sword.
Nice.
Long before the hook sword was featured in films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, it was wielded by the Shaolin monks in ancient China. Established around 495 AD, the Shaolin monastery was a hub of martial arts, where Buddhist monks were trained in self-defense using everything from common tools to versatile weapons like the hook sword. The sword's curved blade allowed the user to trip or disarm opponents. Its crescent guard could be used to slash or block blows. And if used in a pair, the swords could be linked at their hooks to increase the weapon's deadly reach. The Falcata. The Falcata is a curved chopping weapon with a sharpened point. It was popular in pre-Roman Iberia in what is now Spain and Portugal. It is unknown whether the weapon was created in Iberia or evolved from designs in Central Europe and Greece. Whatever its origins, it earned its reputation as a killer. Employed by Spanish infantry, the Falcata allowed its user to deliver a blow with the force of an axe, while cutting like a sword. Hannibal of Carthage was so impressed by this Spanish blade that he equipped many of his African troops with it. Those armed with a Falcata would rely on speed and agility against the heavily armored Roman soldiers. The Kora. The Kora sword originated in Nepal, where it was wielded for centuries by a legendary group of soldiers, the Gurkhas. The Gurkhas were known for their fearless military prowess and weapons-based martial arts, which included symbolic weaponry like the Kora sword. This fearsome sword features a long curved blade that flares outward at the tip, maximizing the force of each swing and making it an ideal weapon for both slashing and chopping. Also used in sacrifice, a skilled Kora wielder could reportedly cut a sheep in half with just one swing. The Hunga. The term Hunga refers to a variety of Central African throwing knives, all of which feature a series of double-edged iron blades attached to a rawhide handle. The Hunga was not only formidable in hand-to-hand combat, but could be thrown from a distance, with some reports claiming it had a throwing range of up to 250 feet. As armor was not used often in Central Africa, this type of throwing iron was particularly devastating. Hunga was often very valuable and could be traded for goods. The Hunga was also wielded by Buffy Summers in the cult series, Buffy the Vampire. The Boar Spear. Developed as early as 700 AD in Europe, the boar spear was forged for both combat and hunting. Known at the time as a bar spear, the weapon was about 5 to 6 feet long and featured a pair of lugs below the leaf-shaped blade. When hunting, the lugs would stop a speared boar from running up the length of the weapon and attacking the user. In combat, the lugs could be used to hook and pull away enemy shields. The blade of the spear could be decorated, with some featuring finely engraved scenes of hunts. On the first season of Game of Thrones, King Robert Baratheon carried a boar spear on his final The Xiphos. The Xiphos was a double-edged short sword wielded in ancient Greece by the Hoplites around the 6th century BC. The Hoplites were armored soldiers famed for battling in phalanx formation, a virtually impenetrable wall of shields and spears. If a hoplite's spear was broken or lost in battle, his trusty Xiphos served as backup. Much like Frodo's iconic sword Sting in The Lord of the Rings, the Xiphos featured a leaf-shaped profile and short blade length, effective for thrusting and slashing in close-quarters combat. It lives on in Greek literature as a classic weapon of warfare, notably brandished by Achilles in Homer's epic poem, the Pandat. The Pandat is a two-handed sword carried into battle by the Dayaks, a group of tribes that have lived on the island of Borneo for thousands of years. Though most Dayak weapons doubled as useful tools, the Pandat was only used in war. Forged from iron, the Pandat features an angled blade and can be swung downwards with two hands. An iron crosspiece was inserted through a hole at the end of the handle, protecting the user's hand. The blade was sometimes decorated with hair or rattan plant. Until the early 20th century, Dayak raiders plundered coastal settlements for resources, money, and even enemy heads, proving just how deadly this weapon could be. The Zulu Iklwa. Zulu Iklwa was introduced by the famous Zulu king, Shaka. He reigned over the Zulu Empire's expansion through southern Africa from 1816 to 1828. A celebrated warrior in his own right, Shaka developed a number of military improvements for the Zulu, including the mandatory adoption of the Iklwa. Replacing long, light throwing spears, the Iklwa was shorter and featured a blade at least 10 inches long. The spear wasn't thrown, rather it was thrust into the enemy and would be carried along with a cowhide shield. It was a fearsome weapon utilized against British colonialists trying to expand their African colonies. The Zulu Iklwa was also wielded by Zulu warriors in the classic film Zulu. The Pada.
What the?
The Pada was a unique gauntlet weapon developed by the Marathas of central India. This double-edged weapon had a long, flexible blade over 4 feet long. The Pada was so distinctive, it was featured in the cult classic film Willow. Instead of featuring a guard like most swords, it had a steel gauntlet that would cover the hand and sometimes even the forearm. With their arm strapped inside of the gauntlet, the user would not have the use of their wrist. Therefore, a soldier equipped with a Pada needed experience in using such a unique weapon. While the Pada was commonly used by mounted warriors, its design allowed even a soldier on foot to strike from a wider variety of angles compared to a conventional sword. The Zweihander. The Zweihander, which means two-hander in German, was a massive sword wielded by Swiss and German mercenary armies in the 16th century. Sometimes stretching to over 6 feet in length, the Zweihander was a longsword featuring an extended grip and broad guard. As European armies employed more pikes and polearms on the battlefield, the Zweihander emerged as a counter-weapon. This enormous sword was used to break up pike formations by cutting spear ends and opening up holes in enemy lines. Due to its size, the Zweihander was only wielded by the biggest and most audacious soldiers. If these soldiers survived charges into enemy spears, they would often be paid double for their substantial risk. The Zweihander eventually faded from the battlefield, but survives today in games such as Dark Souls. The Cavalry Saber. The cavalry saber emerged in Europe around the 18th century. With new developments in battlefield tactics, cavalry soldiers didn't have time for fancy swordplay or thrusts. The cavalry saber allowed mounted soldiers to attack with a deadly overhand slash. It wasn't just the curve of the weapon that made it a dangerous chopper. The tip of the blade was thicker than the hilt, adding more power to the swing. The sword has become one of the more iconic weapons of its time and was used by Captain Jack Aubrey in the film Master and Commander. Though lethal enough to cut off an arm with a single swing, the advent of gunpowder saw the cavalry saber relegated to ceremonial purposes. The Naginata.
All right.
The Naginata emerged around 1,000 years ago in Japan as a powerful pole weapon used by samurai warriors. Featuring a single-edged, slightly curved blade mounted on a wooden shaft, this 7 to 8 foot weapon was ideal for warding off attacks from enemies on horseback. Because it relied on momentum rather than upper body strength, it was an ideal weapon for female warriors. The Naginata was the weapon of choice for samurai wives defending their homes and was even wielded by Seong-mi-na in the video game series Soul Calibur. The traditions of the Naginata continue to be preserved through the teaching of the martial art Adarashi Naginata. The Haladie. The Haladie was a fearsome double-bladed dagger created in ancient India. The two recurved blades would meet at a straight handle and could be used for slashing or stabbing. Some Haladies even featured a third blade running out of the handguard. Though the Haladie might seem like something out of a fantasy video game, it actually dates back to the mid-5th century and was wielded by the Rajput, a major Hindu clan known for their bravery and ferocity in battle. That weapon is the Viking sword. From the 8th to 11th century, the Vikings were the scourge of the northern European coast. One of their most effective tools for raiding and pillaging was a Viking sword, a straight-edged iron sword with a rounded tip and double edge. The Viking sword was built to break through an opponent's defenses using big slashing blows. Since the blade was heavy and usually swung with one hand, a large pommel and hilt were used to balance the weight of the blade. Viking swords were often highly prized by their owners and given names such as Battlesnake and Dog of the Helmet. One was featured in the 2007 epic film Beowulf.